This took a little bit longer than expected. Yes, I am wearing a cap today. Yes, I just realized that just now when looking in the viewfinder. Usually I'm wearing a beanie, and it's my twin CDTV the G that wears the cap. For some reason I am today. Okay, we're just switching it up a little bit from our first video of 2019. I'll be back to the beanie soon. But it's all good because this video is finally here, and today we're going to be talking about the 10 worst rap albums of 2018 in my opinion. Yes, you've seen the thumbnail. Yes, Die Lit is on this list. Please bear with me. Now, before we start the video, just make sure to follow me on Twitter, because if you don't, you're missing out on some classic tweets, such as, "You guys want to hear Mo Sicko?"
Or Bamba Mode.
I know you can't resist following me after seeing that. And also, my recently created SoundCloud account is linked down below if you want to bash my music after hearing me heavily criticize some rappers that you love. So with all that being said, this is your boy CDTV, and today we're going to be looking at the 10 worst rap albums of 2018. Okay, 1, 2, 3, that's how many tracks you need from this album. There's like 3 nice tracks. 1, 2, 3 is a banger. Do Not Disturb is a banger. Pray, oh my god, that is a banger. All 3 of those are great. The problem is, this album isn't 3 tracks long. It's 11, and the other 8 are nowhere near the same level of quality as those 3. Smokepurpp is an artist who I think has a huge amount of potential, but he just hasn't fully unlocked it yet, and because of that, some of his music just sounds very low energy and almost rushed. Listen to Big Dope, which does have a hard beat, most of these do, because Murda Beatz is a great producer, but it's dragged down so much by Purpp's lazy sounding auto-tune vocals.
Hey. I smoke big dope, I smoke big dope, I smoke big dope.
It's weird because on his Dead Star mixtape, the autotune tracks were probably my favourites, but on this tape, they make for the worst songs. A prime example of this is Bumblebee, which is essentially a shameless Travis Scott imitation, down to the intonation he has on his voice and the flow that he uses.
Bumblebee, 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 diamonds peekaboo, like how to see.
And of course there's Walkstar, which just sounds like a Playboi Carti fan trying his best to make a song in Playboi Carti's style. And so for most of this project, Purpp is either sounding like someone else, or is sounding super uninteresting, and that makes this whole thing feel a lot longer than 25 minutes. When an album that short drags on, it's a sign that it's not very good.
Used to get it by the mailbox, 100 bands on a wristwatch, dumb bitch blow the brains out, it's a blessing, I was broke but now I'm flexing.
Rich the Kid mainly has one thing going for him, and it's his very recognizable voice. His rapping has this almost breathless sound to it, I guess that's the best way to describe it, and it is pretty nice at first, but once you keep hearing it, and once you get used to it, you might realize that he doesn't really have anything to offer except that. You see, for the most part, Rich has a formula which he very closely follows, and you just need to hear his hooks to see that. Throughout this album, he quite possibly has the most formulaic hooks in the game. I'll start off with a slower flow for a few bars, then pick up to a faster triplet style flow for the rest of it. No Freezer, Leave Me, Lost It, his part of Early Morning Trapping, End of Discussion, all of these sound like each other.
New Freezer, I woke up thinking about bands, hop over just to a check when I land. Been dripping lately, you know you different baby, know you have so good when I come through, pick up the phone when I want you. Yo bitch fuck she cute, I put the gang on my chain too, they going outside, there's nothing new, my cup is so dirty, your diamond don't shine, my pinky at 30, pouring the paint that's so clean, the rims on the Bentley cost 14, I went from nothing to something, I went to real deal hunters, oh she a blondie, look like a Lonnie.
And the verses aren't much less formulaic either. He always has a couple of flows that he seems to default to. The main thing that's going to help you differentiate between songs is the production and features, honestly. Rich has pretty much taken his unique voice and done nothing with it. Sure, there are a few tracks on here that I do listen to a lot, but I can mainly attribute that again to the production and the features. Rich is someone that works much better as a passable guest verse artist in my opinion. He doesn't really carry an album well. But yay, we have the sequel to this album coming out this month, so I'm just shaking with excitement at the thought of another round of the same stuff.
Come on to the floor. Flow hard like Earth's court. Not the sound of the door. This is the sound when I hit your heart. Hey, little bitch.
If you aren't new to my channel, you'll know that I'm a pretty big Ski Mask fan, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna blindly love everything he puts out, and this album, this was really, really hard for me to enjoy. Even Ski Mask the Slump God himself has stated that he hates this album, and when an artist says that about their own project, it's usually not a very good sign. Everything down to the album's release was incredibly messy, with Ski leaking his own album through his SoundCloud, then being forced to take it down by his label. Then when it was officially released, it literally had the 3 best tracks removed, and the great beat on the song Run was changed, which must have been due to issues with Timbaland because all those songs were produced by him. It was just so muddled and confusing, and that feeling seeps into the project itself. Sure, we still had maybe a couple of songs that were very enjoyable, but this did not feel like a passion project of Ski's at all. While I don't think Ski's other 2018 album, Stokely, was the best thing he's ever put out or anything, at least it really sounded like something he wanted to make. His heart went into it. Book of Eli doesn't sound like that at all. It lacked so much of that magnetic personality that Ski usually has no problem displaying. In my opinion, we even had some of the worst tracks Ski has ever released on this project, namely Lost Souls and Throwaway. And what we're left with is a disappointing 22-minute project that was hyped up for months. As someone who really, really does like Ski's music, this was a pretty big flop. I like to refer to this one as Look Alive, the album. And that is not even an exaggeration. If you've heard Look Alive, you've heard this project. The amount of songs which deviate from that kind of formula on here are next to none.
Oh, Take Heath produced that song?
Let's just slap his beats on 8 other songs on the album, because it's not like he makes the same instrumental every single time. At least we have some songs produced by other people on here to add some variety though. It's just the same shit. Dark pianos, excessive hi-hats, that thing Block Boy always does where he cuts up his flow to try and make it sound more fluent than it actually is, which instead has the opposite effect and makes it sound even more clumsy. You're gonna hear a lot of all of that on this tape. The high points of this album for me were the song Mexico, cause it has a cool beat that is actually different to the rest of the album, and the Lil Pump verse on None of That, because his flow is really catchy on it.
Ooh, we ain't want none of that hoe. I don't drink water, bitch, I only pour foes. Yeah. I'll be getting like 100 bands for the show.
I don't want to sound too harsh, but this album kinda displays why Block Boy only really had one major hit and cooled down instantly. His very short Don't Think That project, which he released later on in the year, is much better than this, so if you want a decent Block project, check that out, because Simi is certainly not that.
Plus I know she enjoy all the bad guys that come for her. Drop my top, cut the ceiling out. Second bop, knock it out.
Who asked for this? We didn't need a solo album from Takeoff. We don't really need a solo album from Offset, though I think his will be the most interesting from the trio. And we most certainly did not need a solo album from the least interesting member of the Migos. Quavo is not built to carry a whole solo project, much less a solo project that is 19 tracks long, with only 10 of them having features. And the reason I say only 10 is because 9 entirely solo Quavo tracks is something I never really wanted to hear. I don't know who does want to hear that. I'm not exactly saying Quavo is awful. The start of this project actually had me kind of hopeful. I think the first 4 tracks are actually very enjoyable. I might even go as far to say Quavo actually showcased a little bit of personality and charisma on them. But it very, very quickly descends into a repetitive, overblown, and quite frankly unnecessary album. Nothing is more emblematic of this than the song Champagne Rosé. Now, I say champagne, that's not how I pronounce it, but Madonna says the phrase Champagne Rosé so many times on this song that it is just ingrained into my fucking brain. Easily the most horrendously drawn out song on Quavo Huncho. I'm guessing Madonna just figured that if she hammered that phrase into our heads just so many times that it would stick there and be something that we remember and want to come back to, but it actually has the opposite effect. That is a skip every single time. If you want an album that exemplifies quantity over quality, This is it right here. This is the one. Quavo is nowhere near interesting enough in terms of vocal performance or personality to carry an entire album, so this was just a failed effort from the start. Now Offset is the only hope of giving us a good solo Migos project. We can only hope.
I wanna be alone for a day. I wanna be by myself. I'd rather be alone with you, babe.
So instead of dropping a song or a short EP for Valentine's Day, Kodak, for some reason, decided it would be a good idea to drop a full-blown mixtape on that day. Now, I won't lie, there definitely is something almost fascinating about the way that Kodak delivers some of his melodies on tracks like Running Out of Love, that I almost find those tracks to be charming. But the novelty of an entire album about love and heartbreak from Kodak with his weird singing voice, it wears off pretty quickly, and the album does start to drag not too far into its runtime. And while I did say I find tracks like Running Out of Love charming, there's not a lot of songs like that on here. A lot of the time Kodak's strange melodies are really hard to take seriously, despite him focusing on relatively emotional topics. If I'm being honest, I found myself laughing at many of his deliveries more than feeling impacted by them.
Hey, I'm drinking liquor, trying to swallow my pride. I hope my son ain't gotta live like I.
There's even a surprising amount of songs like Hate Being Alone or Lodi on here where, despite Kodak's naturally unique voice, he still manages to sound uninteresting. It's just a project that piqued my interest at first because it's tonally very different from Kodak's other projects, but after that intrigue wears off, there's nothing really worth listening to the album for. Honestly, one of the biggest highlights here was Codeine Dreaming, and that wasn't even made for this album. It came out before this album. It was on his previous project. Not only that, but it was on his previous project before this one as a bonus track. Speaking of that track, I want to say I find it kind of weird that Kodak says, "I'm not gonna curse because my son will like this track." Kodak, the song is called Codeine Dreaming. I'm sure it's better to curse on a track that your son will hear than it is to talk about recklessly doing drugs. As it is a Kodak project, you do get a lot of good production throughout it, but there's not really many highlights to this. Interesting at first, but became a bit of a comedic listen very quickly. Not ideal when an album is supposed to hit you emotionally.
Look, I just flipped the switch. Flip, flip. I don't know nobody else that's doing this.
I don't want to use an outdated joke phrase here, but this album is drier than a nun's puss. No lie, as far as I'm concerned, this is just a compilation of the most horrendously lifeless music that Drake has ever put out. I mean, Non-Stop has such a dead beat, I'm surprised it doesn't have a song called Added On. And the same can be said for most of the tracks on the double-sided album. I'll give it the small bit of credit that I can. There are very rare areas where the album does become a little bit more exciting, such as the very sinister, horror-tinged track, Talk Up, or the up-tempo Nice For What.
I've been peeping what you bringing to the table. Working hard, girl, everything paid for. First, last phone bill, car note.
But for the most part, it's a very tough album to get through. Even the first disc is a bit of a challenge. Ironically, Is There More is what I thought by the time we got to that song, and then by the time we hit peak, the album was most certainly not at one. But at least the first half has like 4 or 5 nice songs on it. The second half has like 3. Here is all I have to say to explain it. Beats that have as much life as a cemetery and Drake channeling that same energy into his voice will never be fun. That is what Scorpion is filled to the brim with. Sure, his voice is naturally monotone, but he's shown before that he can twist it into something that's really good to listen to if he wants. Barely any of that here though. Then the tracks with slightly more soulful beats, such as Emotionless and 8 out of 10, they just sound like lesser versions of tracks from Nothing Was the Same, which was in my opinion a great album by the way. Some of the stuff here even sounds like Views leftovers. This album is oatmeal seasoned with sand and served with a glass of cement. Not very tasty stuff, quite dry if I do say so myself.
Sucking my dick, sucking that beat. Had to go cop a AP, had to go cop me some rock, had to go cop me some.
Playboi Carti doesn't have a sound that lends well to a full album. Carti doesn't even have a sound that lends well to a 3-minute song. This album gets old after 4 tracks, And there's 18 of them. At first, I really thought there was something I was missing because I'd seen the Die Lit album of the year meme everywhere, so I tried listening to this in as many different circumstances as I could to try and understand what people were seeing that wasn't quite getting through to me yet. I listened to it through my speaker, through my headphones. Still not album of the year. With some LED lights on to create an atmosphere.
What does Miley Cyrus have to do with this?
I played the album forwards, backwards, sideways, and every single time my reaction was pure confusion. I'm just gonna cut to the chase. I think this album is legitimately awful. There's no context I could see myself enjoying it under. One of the things I've seen people compliment the most about this project is what they've said is artistic minimalism. And I can maybe see what they're talking about on a few tracks, but for the most part, it comes across as not very strategic half rapping with an excess of ad-libs. Minimalistic, sure, but I personally don't see the supposed artistic statement behind it. It's much like this famous painting. A lot of people look at it and they get a lot of meaning and derive a lot of enjoyment from it. I look at it and see fuck all. My point is, if that's why people enjoy the album, then that's great. They like what the album goes for, and I personally don't. Because of that, this album every time was incredibly hard for me to finish. Carti's repetitiveness and low effort flows just strike me as so mundane. The production only has a few real notable moments, and that makes this album a genuine struggle to get through. It very quickly gets to the point where the tracks just all start to blend together into this unidentifiable mess. Now, Shoota is pretty great because Carti makes his best songs with Uzi. Choppa Won't Miss is kinda fun, and Middle of the Summer has a nice vibe to it, but everything else for me is a skip. Listening to this album actually made me like Carti's self-titled album a little bit more because even though I heavily disliked that project as well, I think it sounds quite a bit better when compared to this. No matter how many people I see saying that this is the album of the year, it's instantly getting deleted from my phone after this video goes up. I've honestly listened to it enough at this point, and I don't want to go through another hour of music which feels twice as long again.
I turn a 2 to a 6, yo, serving these strip hoes dick, yo, yeah, you sick of me, yeah, and I know it, all of this money, I blow it.
I've made my feelings on Lil Yachty rapping over beats that have a darker sound to them abundantly clear before, but just in case you somehow haven't heard my thoughts on it, and it's partly because of who Lil Yachty is, and the persona that he's built for himself the past couple of years. Yachty was this goofy, happy-go-lucky guy who made it into the rap game despite everyone frowning at the fact that he was so quirky and weird. So when he completely flips that on its head and decides to rap over these beats with a sinister aesthetic, it just sounds really awkward and out of place to me. Minimalistic trap beats are just not a good combo with Yachty, and that's pretty much what this whole album is, minus like 3 or 4 tracks. When Yachty is trying to sound confident and intimidating, I just really struggle to take it seriously because his delivery doesn't exude that confidence that he's trying to give off.
Never need nothing, they canary all diamonds like the wrap of a butterfinger. Hit him, then my brother follow up, that's a double stinger. Told the bitch truth, she run around like a jet springer.
At best, his performances here are just very uninteresting, and at its worst, the songs are just sonically abrasive, like on the song Pop Out. There are some good songs that I can give credit to. NBA Youngboat is probably the best showcase of actual rapping here. Yachty's flows don't sound awkward at all on that track, they're actually very on point. She Ready was very enjoyable for me because it was much more in line with that Lil Boat 1 sound that I personally enjoy significantly more than this. And Boom is pretty fun too, but everything else falls very short of the mark for me. This is a sound that is never going to be something I enjoy from Yachty, and I genuinely think it makes for an awful album.
Diamond be wet like a bitch, yeah. Diamond be wet like a bitch, yeah. Diamond be wet on my wrist, yeah. Diamond be wet like a bitch, and my diamond be wet on my wrist, yeah.
Come on now. You saw this one coming. If anyone out there is wondering why Lil Xan only has 1 hit on the Hot 100, come listen to this album, and the reason for that will be abundantly clear. Lil Xan's music makes for the weirdest combination of boring and annoying, and that makes this album 44 minutes worth of migraine fuel. Or as someone in my comments would say, Mine green fuel. On this album, Lil Xan comes through with the voice and songwriting capabilities of a toddler, and at some points, these songs just sound like nursery rhymes over rap beats.
Dance don't make me what I am. Dance gon' mess up all my friends.
If you really want to feel your head just splitting though, put on the song Diamonds. I don't want to sound like an old man, but that song is quite literally just noise. Of course, we also have a handful of distorted tracks here, which is just great. Nothing I love hearing more than Lil Xan's baby voice just swimming in 808s. You're getting nothing great from the sound of the album, so maybe you're thinking it can be saved by the lyrics. Well, I must admit, Lil Xan is great at making you feel his pain through his words. For example, when he said, "I didn't really have no friends, skirt, 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 a what?" Then we also have songs where Xan tries to sound hard by saying, "No, you're not from round here," and then goes on to talk about how he never cheated on a test in the same song. I'm sure everyone is just shaking with terror at the thought of you making them bleed out of their neck, as you say you will, after hearing that you stuck to the rules of taking tests. He's not even consistent with his content or tracklist structuring, considering he put a song about taking a bunch of drugs directly after the song in which he condemns Xanax.
Xan's gon' fake, yeah, Xan's gon' betray, yeah. I like lean, I like drugs, I like beams, I got plugs.
They are genuinely back to back. To be honest, if you haven't heard the album yet, the only reason I could really give you to listen to it is to see how far you make it into the track list before tapping out. Seriously, let's make a little game out of this. Try it out and send me a DM on Instagram telling me how far you made it into the track list before you couldn't go any further. In all seriousness, this album is just packed to the brim with elementary level rhymes and songwriting, boring flows, annoying vocal inflections. I'm sure you've clocked that there's not a lot of redeeming qualities to this at all. Never forget that this album made my twin, CDTV the G, who I'm wearing the hat of right now, it made him read to get through the pain of listening to this album. And that, oh fuck, I just nearly destroyed my audio interface. In like the Best Hit Rap Songs video, I accidentally smacked my microphone. Now I'm accidentally throwing my audio interface out the way. I don't know what's going on. I'm just beating up all my equipment. And that, 2007 Squad, that is why Total Xanarchy takes my #1 spot as the worst rap album of 2018. There is no competition. Well guys, that is going to be it for the video today. Thank you for sticking around and waiting for this upload. I know it definitely took a lot longer than I expected it to. I guess listening to albums that you don't really like on repeat isn't as easy as I thought it would be. But hey, I'm happy that this is finally done, so if you enjoyed it, leave a like. Let me know how you felt about this list in the comments below and what you personally thought the 10 worst rap albums of 2018 were. Of course, Happy New Year to all you guys. I just realized this is the first video I've uploaded in 2019, so very much looking forward to how this year goes. And if you want to join me on that journey, you can of course click the subscribe button if you haven't clicked it already, turn on notifications so YouTube might notify you whenever I upload, and you can find me on social media under the name CDTV Productions everywhere. I don't have any other name on social media, so it's just CDTV Productions on everything. If you can't find me on it, I don't have that social media set up for me. So yeah, that's it for the end of year top 10s. I hope you guys enjoyed them. I really loved making them all. I feel like they're personally some of the best videos that I've put out, which is really nice to say. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys. I will see you all in the next one. And this is your boy, CDTV Productions with the G's hat, signing out.